Before 1960, if you wanted to show time travel in a movie, you had a few options. A bump on the head, a ghost dragging you through the past and future, or just walking through a door at the right moment and hoping for the best. Nobody had figured out how to show someone actually travelling through time, sitting in a machine, watching the world change around them. This was achieved in a rushed 29-day shoot with a budget under $1 million. But it was led by a crew that would later go on to shape Star Trek, Star Wars, and Industrial Light and Magic. The Time Machine created a visual language that Hollywood still speaks today. Welcome back to Golden Flicker. In this video, we'll look at how this little film came together, the casting struggles, the ingenious special effects, and the iconic prop that disappeared for years, only to be restored by future Oscar winners. We'll compare what George Pal kept from Wells's novel and what he threw away. And we'll see why a 65-year-old movie remains the definitive template for time travel on screen. But before we travel back, do you remember the first time you watched this film? Was it a Saturday afternoon discovery, or did the Morlocks keep you up at night? Let's step into the machine. H.G. Wells published The Time Machine in 1895. While he wasn't the first to write about time travel, he was the first to imagine a technological device rather than using dreams or magic. But for Wells, the machine was just a vehicle for a much darker message. The novel is a bleak socialist critique of Victorian capitalism. In the year 800 and 2701, humanity has split into two species: the Eloi, descendants of the idle upper class, and the Morlocks, the subterranean evolution of the working class. The twist, of course, is that the oppressed have become the predators, feeding on the Eloi like cattle. The book ends not with triumph, but with entropy, the Earth dying under a bloated red sun. This pessimistic atheist vision was exactly what George Pal didn't want to make. Pal was a devout Catholic, with a history of softening the darker themes of his source material. In his earlier adaptation of War of the Worlds, for instance, he took a cowardly clergyman from Wells's novel and transformed him into a heroic martyr. His goal was always to find hope in the hopelessness. So when he approached The Time Machine, Pal wasn't just adapting a story. He was translating a socialist atheist's warning into something that would work for Cold War America. But he had to do it fast and cheap. MGM granted a budget of under $1 million and a shooting schedule of just 29 days. With London out of the question due to costs, the entire future of humanity had to be built inside the sound stages of Culver City, California. For the role of the time traveller, called George in the film, a nod to both George Pal and H.G. Wells, Pal originally considered British actors like David Niven and James Mason. But he changed his mind. This wasn't just a philosophical journey, but a fight for survival. Pal needed someone younger, more athletic, someone who looked like he could actually punch a Morlock. He chose Rod Taylor, an Australian actor who had never carried a major film. It was a massive gamble, but Taylor brought a rugged idealism to the role. He later admitted he was asked more questions about the time machine than any other work in his career, even after starring in Hitchcock's The Birds, and even after he turned down the role of James Bond. Casting Wiener was more complicated. Pal discovered Yvette Mimieux, a young woman with zero acting experience. She was only 17, though she lied and told the studio she was 18. Rod Taylor famously described her at the time as a strange hippie child. On set, the inexperience showed. She struggled initially, but improved so dramatically during production that Powell actually went back and reshot her early scenes to match her new confidence. It worked. She became one of MGM's top stars of the 60s. Rounding out the cast were character actors destined for fame. Most notably, Alan Young played David Philby, and also Philby's son James, both young and old. That's 3 roles in one film. Young would become famous the following year as Wilbur Post on Mr. Ed, and decades later as the voice of Scrooge McDuck in DuckTales.
Nothing good is ever free.
He's the only actor to appear in both the 1960 film and the 2002 remake. The Time Machine itself needed to look like nothing audiences had ever seen. Bill Ferrari handled the art direction, but the build fell to the legendary Wah Chang. For inspiration, George Powell looked back to his childhood in Hungary. He didn't want a spaceship, he wanted the elegance of a horse-drawn sleigh. The final result was a masterpiece of Victorian industrial design. A sled-like chassis with a massive rotating disc behind the seat. That disc served a dual purpose. It acted as both a spinning clock and a solar abstraction, visually selling the passage of time. The controls were brass and crystal. The seat was crushed red velvet. And a meta detail for the sharp-eyed, a small brass plate on the front read, "Manufactured by H. George Wells." It became one of the most iconic props in film history. And then, like the traveller himself, it went on a dangerous journey. Powell kept the miniature filming model at his home, but it was tragically destroyed in the 1961 Bel Air fire that claimed his house. The full-size hero prop fared only slightly better. It went into MGM storage until 1971, when it was sold at the famous MGM auction, the same event where the ruby slippers found a new owner. The machine sold for nearly $10,000 to the owner of a travelling show. Film historian Bob Burns was there. He desperately wanted it. He was outbid. But time, as they say, has a way of changing things. 5 years later, a friend of Burns was browsing a thrift shop in Orange County. There, amidst used furniture and discarded junk, sat the machine. It was in terrible condition. The velvet chair was gone. The pods were shattered. But the disc was still there. Burns rescued it immediately. To restore it, he accidentally assembled a team of future legends. George Powell, thrilled the machine had been found, provided the original blueprints. The restoration took just 4 weeks. But look at who was holding the screwdriver. Helping with the restoration was a young Dennis Muren. He would later become the head of Industrial Light and Magic and win 9 Academy Awards for work on Star Wars, Jurassic Park and Terminator 2. Also on the team was DC Fontana, who would go on to become the matriarch of Star Trek, writing classic episodes like Journey to Babel. Think about that. The past of sci-fi was being fixed by the architects of its future. The restored prop debuted at Bob Burns' 1976 Halloween show, with George Powell himself in attendance as the guest of honour. Since then, the machine has continued to travel. It appeared in Carl Sagan's Cosmos, and you can spot it at the Inventors Convention of Gremlins. It even caused chaos in The Big Bang Theory, where Sheldon and Leonard accidentally buy the full-scale replica, blocking their staircase and haunting Sheldon with dreams of Morlocks. To create the iconic flickering passage of time, cinematographer Paul Vogel built a massive 7-foot circular shutter with coloured gels. Pink for dawn, clear for day, blue for night. By spinning it in front of the lens, he created that hypnotic strobing effect that feels like accelerating through days and nights. Then there was the growing apple tree. As George speeds through time, we see a tree sprout, mature, and bear fruit in seconds. It looks like nature photography. It's not. It's a painting. Artist Bill Brace painted the tree's growth on a canvas.
He did very realistic renderings of flowers and plants for the LA Times.
So we set up his canvas in front of the camera, a locked-off camera, and he just started to paint, frame by frame. That's how those scenes were done.
But the most famous effect was the destruction of London. When volcanoes erupt and lava floods the streets, you aren't looking at dangerous chemicals. You are looking at oatmeal. The crew mixed tons of oatmeal with orange and red food colouring and poured it down a tilted miniature set. It looked perfect on camera. The problem? The oatmeal was prepared days in advance. Under the hot studio lights, it began to ferment. By the time they shot the scene, the apocalypse smelled like rancid breakfast. Budget constraints forced other clever hacks. The futuristic Eloy dome had no ceiling, so they could use free sunlight. The air raid uniforms? Recycled costumes from Forbidden Planet. This penny-pinching creativity extended to the monsters too. To design the Morlocks, legend William Tuttle, who had worked on The Wizard of Oz, visited the San Diego Zoo to study ape movement. The result was a nightmare of green latex and fur, with a brilliant practical touch. Tiny light bulbs embedded in the masks to make their eyes glow in the dark. Tuttle's design was so effective it influenced The Twilight Zone and later helped him win the first ever Oscar given specifically for makeup. George Powell kept the skeleton of Wells's story. A Victorian inventor, a machine, a trip to the year 800-2701 and the terrifying Morlocks. But he completely transplanted the soul. In the novel, the time traveller goes directly to the far future. Powell, however, needed to bridge the gap between Victorian England and the 1960s audience. So he added 3 stops: 1917, 1940, and a terrifying stop in 1966 to witness a nuclear attack on London. These stops served a specific purpose. They shifted the story's villain from capitalism to war. Remember, Wells was writing a socialist critique. In the book, the Eloy and Morlocks are the result of class division. The rich becoming uselessly beautiful, the workers becoming subterranean monsters. Powell realised that a Marxist critique wouldn't sell in post-Red Scare America. So he made a political substitution. In the film, the split is caused by nuclear war. Some stayed underground, others remained on the surface. The enemy wasn't class, it was the bomb. This need for clarity also birthed the talking rings. Powell, needing to deliver exposition to a popcorn audience, so to fill in the blanks, he invented the spinning rings, essentially a futuristic audiobook. But the biggest change was philosophical. In the novel, Weiner dies. The traveller escapes alone. He then travels millions of years further to witness the dying Earth, a haunting sequence with giant crabs crawling under a bloated red sun, watching the universe fade into entropy. George Powell dreamed of a scene with Rod Taylor and Yvette Mimieux standing on a silent, dying beach. But the budget simply wouldn't allow for giant crabs. So Powell did what he always did. He chose hope over despair. Instead of witnessing the end of the universe, George returns to 1900. He gathers 3 books and goes back to the future to reunite with Weiner and help the Eloy rebuild civilization. Wells wrote a tragedy about the inevitability of decay. Powell made a movie about the indomitable human spirit. And that leaves us with the question that has plagued fans for 65 years.
Which 3 books would you have taken?
Pause the video, go down to the comments and tell us your 3 choices. And while you're there, illuminate our day by clicking like and subscribing to Golden Flicker. We explore the hidden history of cinema every week, and we don't want you to miss the next trip. Now, let's look at what else was hidden in this movie. George Pal had a peculiar tradition. He was close friends with Walter Lantz, the creator of Woody Woodpecker. Because of this friendship, Pal hid a Woody reference in almost every film he made. In The Time Machine, listen closely during the Eloy scenes. You can hear a distinct Woody Woodpecker laugh in the background forest noise. Also, during the chaotic air raid sequence, keep an eye on the extras. A little girl drops a toy, then runs back to pick it up. That toy is a Woody Woodpecker figure. The production was also thrifty with its sets. George's Victorian home? That interior was used in 3 different Twilight Zone episodes. The Grand Staircase? That was a recycled piece from the 1944 film Kismet. And the recycling didn't stop at physical props. The volcanic eruption was originally filmed for Powell's 1951 disaster epic, When Worlds Collide. He reused it here and then recycled it again just 1 year later to sink the city in Atlantis, the lost continent. Why build 3 volcanoes when one blows up just fine? But the best detail is a mistake. In the Great Hall scenes with the Eloy, look at the floor. You can clearly see white parallel lines. Those are parking space markers. The set was built directly over the studio parking lot, and in the rush of the 29-day shoot, nobody bothered to paint over them. The film was a massive financial success, earning back its budget nearly 3 times over. It won the Oscar. It was nominated for the Hugo Award. Naturally, MGM wanted more. A sequel titled Return of the Time Traveller was placed on the 1961 roster. Rod Taylor and Yvette Mimieux were set to return. The script included a sequence where George overshoots his destination and discovers a submerged Atlantis. And remember those giant crabs from the Dying Earth sequence that Pal couldn't afford the first time? They were in the sequel script, with stop-motion legend Ray Harryhausen attached to animate them. But due to management shake-ups at MGM, the project was shelved. Pal spent the rest of his life trying to revive it. He died in 1980, still dreaming of those giant crabs. And now, the Golden Flicker moment. So, what did this little film actually create? First, it gave us the visual vocabulary of time travel. The seated pilot. The world accelerating around a stationary machine. Every time travel film since, from The Terminator to Doctor Who, borrows from this template. In 1993, a documentary called Time Machine, The Journey Back, proved just how deep this influence went. It featured Michael J. Fox sitting in the restored prop, openly discussing how Pal's design influenced the DeLorean in Back to the Future. But the film's greatest legacy is the people it inspired. The crew of this low-budget movie went on to build the next 50 years of sci-fi. Hua Chang, who built the machine and the Morlocks, became the unsung hero of Star Trek. He designed the tricorder, the communicator, the phaser, and yes, even the tribbles. Dennis Muren, who restored the prop, became the head of ILM and the most decorated visual effects artist in Oscar history. George Tomasini, the editor, went on to cut Psycho and The Birds for Hitchcock. William Tuttle won the first ever makeup Oscar. This 29-day production was a training ground for the geniuses who would later give us the Enterprise and the Millennium Falcon. All the time in the world. Financially, George Pal's gamble paid off spectacularly. The Time Machine earned over $2.6 million globally. That might not sound like much today, but for a film made on a shoestring budget of under $1 million, it was a massive hit. It satisfied the studio accountants at MGM and delighted audiences across the US and Europe. Since then, Hollywood has tried to take the controls again. There was a TV movie in 1978, and of course the 2002 big-budget remake directed by Simon Wells, H.G. Wells's own great-grandson. But even with modern CGI and a direct bloodline to the author, neither could replicate the charm of George Pal's handmade world. Maybe that's because the 1960 film did something the others didn't. It chose to betray the source material to save the human spirit. H.G. Wells told us we were doomed. He wrote a warning about entropy. George Pal told us we could fix it. He filmed a dream about hope. The unfaithful adaptation became the definitive version because it captured the pure, childlike desire to believe that the future is in our hands. So, I have one final question for you. When you look at the future, whose eyes are you looking through? Are you a realist like H.G. Wells or a dreamer like George Pal? Tell us in the comments below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey, please like and subscribe to Golden Flicker so you never miss a story from the annals of cinema. I'll see you in the future.